Heard on Thursdays with Nikki is about to go live online. Catch HOT, the iconic radio show that made Philippine FM radio talk, every Thursday on the Monster.
Streaming video on the Monster Facebook page at RX931, the Monster YouTube channel at RX931, and twitch.tv/Monster RX931.
You heard on Thursday's host, Nikki Porter. Stand by and enjoy the program.
Hey, good evening, monsters. My name is Nikki Porter, and I'm back for more hot conversation on Heard on Thursdays, the show that made Philippine FM radio talk, only on Manila's hottest, Monster RX93.1. You know, if there were a topic that was in our collective consciousness all through the past 2 years, it wasn't the virus, it wasn't the vaccines, it wasn't even quarantine. Because, to be honest, they were more upfront and center anyway. But it was one thing that distracted us from all the negativity. And that's food. We were all thinking about food, how to get food, how to cook food, and eventually how to sell food. In the best moments, the appreciation of how good it is and how lucky we are to be eating it. Anything, any good food. So tonight, as we celebrate the start of the year of the water tiger, and as we hope fervently that we are already witnessing the end of an era, let's talk about food. And not just any food, but your favorites. Korean food and boulangerie or bakery things. Our guest tonight is a specialist in both. She is also a renowned chef, pastry chef, Korean restaurateur, and a culinary instructor. I'm talking about Chef Andrea Amado. She has immersed herself in learning the complex gastronomy of Korea for over 2 decades. She has worked in several notable restaurants, pioneering and leading teams in streamlining restaurant operations. From 2011 to 2015, she was a president of Toujours Philippines, the popular South Korean Asian French bakery. She then founded the artisan bakery Boulangerie 22. In 2017, she opened Yori Korean Barbecue Restaurant, and currently she is also one of the chef instructors of the Epicurean Academy of Culinary Arts, or KICA. So, ladies and gentlemen, monsters of all ages, heard on Thursdays, Chef Andrea Amado. Woo! Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Chef. Would you rather me call you Chef or Andrea, by the way?
I'm good either way. Andrea is fine.
All right. So, Andrea, I know you're super busy, and because of all of your restaurants, plus everyone seems to be cooking or baking these days. But what's one thing that you've picked up during the pandemic that isn't work related, like a hobby or your latest binge watch? What has kept you sane?
Sane. That's hard. But one of the hobbies I used to do, or because before the pandemic, before the lockdown, we were busier with other things. So now we're stuck at home. I started, I do cross stitch. I do crochet. And so I started with finishing projects that I didn't finish before. Now that I had time, I was finishing it. So I would do amigurumi projects, which is mga dolls, small dolls, using crochet. So for me, it's relaxing. I like doing things with my hands. It's something that, I give to my kids for them to play with or display, but it's something to do that occupies time, and it makes me happy.
Yeah, of course. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that you crochet. It's so cute. I wish I knew how to. But anyway, enough about me. We'll talk Boulangerie 22 later on the show as well. So let's focus first on Korean cuisine. So you are it's your expertise or one of your expertises. So what was your entry point to Korean cooking? Did you take it up because you love Korean food or that it was becoming a trend? What's the story behind that?
Well, the early part of my career, I had to go to Korea a lot for work.
Mm.
So
Wow.
because of that, when you travel, you expose yourself to a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my complaints is that the Korean food that we have in the Philippines is either overly salty, overly sweet. It's not the right Korean taste.
Mm.
So at first, I would cook at home. Well, my kids are part Korean, so they would have certain Korean cravings also. So
I love
because
that.
of that, you would want to satisfy whatever their requests are. But later
Mm-hmm.
on, eventually, we got a Korean chef to develop the menu and the food for Yori.
Mm.
But majority of the things that I've been cooking are either taught by someone in Korea or something that I've learned over the years of cooking Korean because a lot of ingredients before are very hard
Mm-hmm.
to get, but now you
Yeah.
can get majority of it online. I mean, Shopee or Lazada delivers a lot
True.
of these Korean ingredients, so it's
Yeah.
very accessible now.
That's awesome. And so you traveled to South Korea frequently. What was the one of the best meals that you've had there? Like what was the best stew or something that you went there and you were like, we should have that in Manila. How come we don't have this?
I believe, the best dishes are the simplest. Like something like when it's raining, it's heartwarming, you eat some
Yeah.
soup or stew that is boiling. The simplest of dishes are usually the best. One of the things I've tried when I was in Myeongdong was budae, which is army-based stew.
Hmm.
It was the first recorded fusion dish in the world, and
Wow.
this was because during the Korean War, the Americans would give canned food, hot dogs, macaroni, pork, and
Mm.
beans to the Koreans as a form of armistice to,
Yeah.
pacify them. But the Koreans, they don't know what to do with it. So they added kimchi and tofu and they made it Korean. So that dish, of course they can make that at home, is very satisfying for me because it hits the right level. It's
Mm.
has spam, as
Yeah.
kimchi. It's one of those fantastic dishes that are very simple to make.
I love that. And it's just the stews are just so fragrant. Like what are usually the spices? Is it still like gochujang? I know that's one thing that I know, but I know there's a plethora of spices that they use for their stews and their soups and everything.
Okay, so the three basic ones are the three paste. You have gochujang. You
Hmm.
have, well, gochujang is the paste, gochugaru is the powder. But if you're talking about just the paste, you have gochujang, samjang, and doenjang. That's it. All just the three. You don't have to know anything else. It's that simple.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You're making me believe I can make Korean food. But I know, like, I've seen a lot of people actually just take on the challenge and make Korean food as well. But aside from Korean food, of course, I have to ask this as someone who watches K drama. Do you also watch K drama? Like, how are
I
you a
do.
fan?
I do. I spent, what do you call this? The Chinese New Year watching the zombie movie. All
Oh,
of
I
us
know,
are
all
dead.
dead.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, my God, we should be celebrating, but I'm watching this sad zombie movie. And
Well,
my
what?
problem is,
Mhm.
yeah, my problem is when I start watching it, I have to finish it.
Yeah, agree. Agree.
Yeah,
What's your
it's very
all-time favorite
difficult.
K drama?
Ah, that's very hard.
Or top three, if you can
Okay.
choose.
No, because there are some things I watch by myself, and there are some things I
Mhm.
watch with, let's say, my daughter, because she watches
Yeah.
it also. I think one thing that we enjoy watching together is Hwarang.
Oh my gosh, yes,
Kasi
I watched that
kami,
too.
sabay kami, like, and it's funny. It has a lot of, but it's just it hits the right note. So it's something we
Mhm.
watch together. So we
Yeah,
enjoy that, and of course, Crash Landing.
yeah, of course.
And then yeah, we're still arguing between Park Seo Joon and Hyun Bin and who is the better
Yes,
guy.
yes,
So
so
yeah.
true. And so now, like, so with all these K dramas, actually, this is hopefully this is the last K drama related question I have. Who is your K drama oppa? Who's your crush?
I have to go with Hyun Bin Parin.
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, she likes Park Seo Joon, so it's a toss between the two because I prefer, like, like manlier looking Korean men because some
Mm.
are very, they call it gotminam, which is literally translates to flower boys. So some of the
Ah, okay.
boys have very soft features.
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
don't like that.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. And
Yeah.
so let me try and move on now from K drama because if not, we're gonna keep talking about all night. Okay, okay. This is my ultimate last. I promise. So, are you like
Okay.
me, who actually feels incomplete watching a K drama without having Korean food to eat along while watching it?
One of the things I realized with my kids is that Korean food does not excite them anymore because we eat it
Oh,
so often.
fair.
So
That's
parang
fair.
we eat more bulgogi than adobo in this house
Mm-mm.
because they grew up with that, and that's usually my emergency meals. I have dumplings, I have, so parang like if they eat Korean Filipino food, they get more excited kasi mas hindi sila sanay. So for me, if I get hungry during, well, I don't know if you watch Sassy Girl, the
Not yet. It's on my
movie.
list.
That's fantastic. When I watched that, and there's a scene when the father was drunk and just falls in the table, I had this sudden urge to want to drink soju, but I'm like, that feels good right now.
Mhm.
So, yung ganun ba? But, and
Mm-mm.
then sometimes when you're watching, they're eating fried chicken,
Yeah, that's so true.
watching Korean dramas. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's one of the worst things for me to do is watch K drama like midnight, and then they start showing all the food. It's like
Oh
no,
no.
no, that's terrible.
Oh
But
no.
okay,
And they
yeah,
eat so well. Parang
yes,
when they eat
they're
it,
not
parang ang sarap.
makinig.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
You know
so
why?
why? Please tell
Because
me.
the food is sponsored.
Mm,
That's the sponsor. They have to
oh,
show them eating it. So parang it's part of the whole, it's what gets you in.
that's
So
true.
in Crash Landing, there's so many chickens.
Oh, nga. So yeah, that's so true. Oh my gosh, yeah. But even the street food, the tteokbokki, like that's the one thing like I can't get enough of. It's just so good when it's cooked right. Also,
My version of tteokbokki has seafood and cheese and ramen.
what?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
blew my mind right now.
Fish cake, seafood like shrimp, clams, mussels, and cheese. It's
Wow,
cheesy hemularapoki. It's
wow.
everything you would want in your tteokbokki.
That is also like elevated, like that's an elevated dish right there. So that actually brings me to ramyun because it's like so you have all of these seafood add-ons, but for those people who probably just want to add simple things, like what are go-to add-ons to elevate ramyun?
Well, the easiest thing is instead of adding water, you use
Hmm.
milk.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
use
it's
milk. Just
milk.
that.
Wow. All right.
Think Hokkaido ramen in Japan feels, but you
Hmm.
don't want to boil it because you don't want to make the milk curdle. So
Mm-hmm.
low and slow boil until the noodles are cooked. But instead of water, you just use, some people, what they do is they cook the noodles separately and
Mm-hmm.
they just add it in with the flavoring and just warm the milk. You can add, frozen seafood right now because of the IQF technology is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So pop in some frozen shrimps, clams. It's so good. And then add the egg at the end and don't stir it. So last 2 minutes, just
Don't
drop the egg.
stir it. Okay. Wow. I feel like this should have been a cooking demo instead of an interview. No, but anyway, so okay, so for all of you watchers who are tuned in, I'm talking to Chef Andrea Amado. She is just blowing my mind with these tips for Korean food, especially for ramyeon. Now, I also want to talk about some gyupsal though. So, why did Korean food, particularly some gyupsal, become so phenomenally popular in the Philippines? Would it so, pun intended, be because of K drama too? Oh, what would be the possibilities behind that?
Well, Korean barbecue, if you think about it, it's a communal food. It's something you eat with your friends, with your family. It's something enjoyed in the middle. So, it became like an activity. You cook it, you wrap it with the lettuce. And honestly, a lot of us are carnivores and we love pork.
Yeah,
So it's easy to love, and you cannot blame them because it's also, pork is also affordable here.
yeah,
But what I want people to understand is there is more to Korean food than just samgyeopsal. They can try
yeah.
moksal at home.
Mm.
Moksal is basically pork steak. It has
Okay.
lesser
Mm-hmm.
fat, and it's equally as good, but it's actually healthier.
Mm. Ooh, moksal. All right.
Yeah,
Cool. All right.
moksal.
With kimchi. Oh, okay. Nikki, I need to stop. It's 11.
Yes,
I should not eat.
but we're talking about food.
I know, I know. But all right, let's move on. Let's kaya natin to. Okay. So, is there a relationship actually between Korean cuisine and Filipino cuisine, or what are the common traits that Korean and Filipino cuisine have?
Well, Koreans, the assumption with Korean food is that because it's spicy. If it's not barbecue, the soups and stews are always spicy, which is not
Mm-hmm.
the case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of the dishes they have a lot of stew dishes, and there is one dish in particular. It's called andong timdak, which is a chicken dish in the Andong province. It tastes
Mm-hmm.
a lot like adobo. It's like a
Oh.
spicy adobo. It's salty. There's not it's like the Chinese style adobo with a bit of spice. So
Hmm.
if you look at a lot of these dishes, there are some similarities in taste.
Okay.
Filipino food is there are a lot of stews, a lot of saltiness, a lot of meat, but there's also a lot of fried fish in Korean cuisine.
Hmm.
So the simple basic food, there are some similarities.
Mm, okay, so that's why we enjoy a lot of it. I want to try
Yeah.
that a Korean adobo. That sounds
Yeah,
interesting.
andong timdak.
I'm not gonna try and pronounce it. I
Ah, no.
don't no. But okay, so let's move on now from Korean cuisine. As much as I am enjoying it, it's so I'm so hungry now. So let's start now from the very beginning of your journey as a chef. When did your interest in food and cooking even start?
Well, since I was young, I think when you cook, you have to love eating. You have to love food.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you are a picky eater, and you sometimes mentally criticize certain dishes you've tried, like, oh, I don't like
Right.
this, I don't like that, and you end up wanting to make your own. I think that's how it starts. But
Mm-hmm.
in most cases, cooking is all about the effort. So it's all about, let's say, preparing it in such a way that will make it better, adding certain ingredients to make it like upgrade it more. But cooking for most people, especially during this lockdown, became a
Mm-hmm.
therapy, a form of therapy for them,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a way for them to express themselves. And in some cases, for a lot of people who lost their job during the lockdown, it became a form of, income for them by
Yeah.
selling food, baking, promoting it online, getting the word out. It's not easy to start an online business because a lot of people never started business before, so they made
Mm-hmm.
a lot of small mistakes.
Yeah, that is true. So there are a lot of people who are passionate about food and being in the kitchen, even more so now during the pandemic. But what was it about culinary life itself that made you decide that this was your calling? I'm going to study for it. I'm going to make it my ultimate skill.
Well, it at first it was more like a personal thing. It's something I do for my family. So
Okay.
usually I enjoy hosting parties, smaller parties with friends or family, and it started with that.
Mhm.
Because cooking, of course, it brings the family together. So it's a way for me to, show love
Yeah.
to friends or families. Food is especially now, I send food to, let's say, friends or family. It makes them feel that they're thought of. Instead of just calling them, I'll send them a box of cookies. I'll send
Yeah.
them a container of kimchi fried rice with bulgogi on top. It
Hmm.
makes them feel like they're thought of.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned earlier that it's really all about effort, because if you think about it also, when you make food, like making the food is sometimes takes so much longer than for people to
Yeah.
actually eat it. So do you actually tell people who are enjoying your food, slow down, take your time, because it's like, this is your effort and now it's disappearing so quickly? Or are you actually, is it a compliment on your end that okay, they're eating it so fast, so I'm like, the food is pretty good?
Well, I mean, it's not good for you to be eating too fast. You can get stomach, problems later
Yeah.
on. And the thing is, when I make my food, I like to make it pretty. So I like, one of the things I bought during this lockdown are plates, like a lot of nice,
I
nice
love it.
plates. So I like, placing, like nice, even the herbs, the decor, and like all
Mm-hmm.
these stuff to make the condiments, the correct condiments per dish to make it pretty. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes I see, because I have three teenagers and they eat a lot. So they eat fast, they eat a lot, and I have to tell them, slow down. It took me how many hours to make that? I've been
Yeah.
softening that meat since last night, whatever, but I cannot. I mean, I have to remind them, but of course, either way is good that they eat fast. But I
Mhm.
would want them to savor the flavor,
Yeah,
basically.
true. That makes sense. So, for those aspiring chefs out there, maybe they'd like to know as well, what are the habits or the attitudes do they need to learn or unlearn in order to succeed in an international culinary scene?
Well, attitude. Honestly, majority of Filipinos, we are very resilient, especially during this lockdown. We always try to find the silver lining in things, which is fantastic
Mm,
because you need that kind of attitude now more than ever. Now,
yeah.
if you're going to pursue a career in this field, I suggest you really study and you really hone your skills, because the basic, let's say, kitchen knife skills, it takes a lot of practice. So
Mm,
it's a lot of perseverance, a lot of hard work, a lot of research. But also, what's important is you have to expose yourself in different types of cuisine.
mm,
Because you cannot say that you want to cook Filipino only, and it's very, parang very close-minded to think that way. If you're going to enter this field, the best way we can improve on how we cook is by experiencing other cuisines, other countries, their spices, how they do food preparation, to, let's say, widen your widen your knowledge, but also to improve your final output or when you make your own recipes.
Hmm. Yeah. And would you also agree that, well, because I never worked in the kitchen, but I have worked closely with the kitchen, and kitchen language can be brutal. So would you agree that, these aspiring chefs should also have thick skin, and, just to kind of keep the head down and just keep working, because sometimes head chefs or sous chefs, even, they can be quite temperamental.
Well, if you're working in a hotel, yes, you have to work your way up because the environment is very different. It
Mm,
depends what field you want to go to, but hotels, that's it's more stressful because you have to work your way up, and there is a certain culture depending on which place you go to. But sometimes they're hard on you for a reason. It's because you're behind skill wise,
mm,
and your let's say your performance is not up to par, and you affect other people because the kitchen has to work like clockwork. So for
yeah.
example, if you cannot fill or you cannot serve what is needed on your end, it affects other departments as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that they have to remember. Is one of the things that they have to remember if you're an
Yeah.
aspiring chef. And for all the monsters who are tuned in, I am talking with Chef Andrea Amado. She is a restaurateur, a pastry chef, a Korean cuisine chef, and so many more. So many more, actually. And we're talking about her life as a chef, her journey in the culinary world. So now I also want to know, what was the most memorable or a memorable apprenticeship or culinary moment that you had that kind of that changed the way that you saw your life in the kitchen or how you make food?
Well, memorable in the kitchen. Well, that would be there's a lot of things that was shocking to me when I was doing my OJT. And
Mm,
this was more, what, like 2 decades ago. So for me, because I wasn't doing much chores at home, and I studied hotel restaurant in Benil. So in a way, I'm sort of pampered, and they gave me the dishwashing duties for 2 weeks.
oh wow.
So so I mean, like, okay, like, sure. I'm like questioning, what am I gonna learn from this? But at the end of the day, there is something, with hard work, with physical work, that you learn, that you end up understanding certain things. I learned how to use dishwashing machine. I learned
Yeah.
how much leftovers are given back.
Oh yeah.
It was memorable because I was so happy that I did it without complaining. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't happy doing it. I was quite young then, but I was very, I didn't want to do it, but now looking back, I was happy that I did it without making a fuss, without complaining that I shouldn't be doing this, or whatever. Like, I was thinking it, but I didn't voice it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very humbling experience, which I'm sure taught me a lot.
And there's actually a couple head chefs I know. They started out as either dishwashers or potato peelers, and like they really find so much humility in that experience. Like they all
Yeah.
actually think of that like very fondly when you ask them about that. So I love that you actually shared that. It means that's why you're so successful. Like that's why, because it's just it's a very humbling experience, like you mentioned. So now you're in the culinary world, and then you started Boulangerie 22. Apart from that, you're also a member of a culinary school yourself, the Epicurean Academy of Culinary Arts, or TICA. So you're a
Yeah.
chef instructor there. What's the program or programs that you teach?
Well, I usually handle the the Korean food, the Korean
Mm.
classes. With Tika kasi, one of the big parts of our student database is really the students who wants to learn something to sell online.
Mm.
So um, we have other chef instructors who does other dishes. We have Chef Aniel for baking. Pauline also. Chef P does a lot of baking classes. We have Chef Gabby who does a lot of the uh, party trays or the empanada, the bagoong classes. So the thing is, we try to diversify as much as we can. But majority of the classes that are doing well or that have sold very well are the ones that are focused on online sales. So, for
Mm.
example, my best selling class is actually my kimchi class.
Wow.
So I teach you how to make kimchi, three kinds. So the one with oysters, the one for
Mm.
selling, and mango kimchi.
Mm.
So it the mango kimchi, I have some students who were featured in actually in Rappler
Oh, wow.
for the mango kimchi. She did very well. I'm very happy for her. So a lot of these things, it makes it easier for them because they have a recipe to follow. After they follow the recipe, after doing it so much, I'm sure they have their own spin to it by now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's easier to, let's say, watch a video, learn what the instructor knows, because the thing is sometimes, especially for baking, there are troubleshooting involved.
Mhm.
Sometimes you over whip your butter and cream, sometimes you over bake it. So the fact that you have access to instructors, it's actually very, it makes it a lot easier because you know the wrong thing you did and you will not waste money on ingredients.
Mm. Yes. Oh my gosh. And ingredients can be so expensive. So it's a good
Yes.
thing. It's definitely a good thing to take culinary classes. Why not from Tika? For all of you monster sales,
Yes.
So now let's talk bread as well. So it seems that baking cakes and pastries also they've been close to your heart from the very start. So what made you want to open an artisan bakery like Boulangerie 22?
Well, I always love to end a meal with dessert. I love to. But then, like, after a heavy meal, you have whatever, and then you just want to cap it off, even with a small macaron or a small
Mhm.
chocolate cake. It's just a nice way to, wrap things up. So personally, I do not like my cakes or my breads overly sweet.
Mm.
When I have chocolate cake, I prefer dark chocolate. When I have caramel, I want the smokiness of the caramel, that taste, instead of just all sweet. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, because there are three major bakery concepts. The American ones, which is muffins, buttercream cakes,
Right.
cookies, very rich, very sweet, very heavy. And you have the European ones, which you have the baguette, the croissant, like all, like the traditional baking methods. But you also have the Korean and Japanese ones. That concept needs to be explored more at that time.
Yeah.
That's why we brought in to the Jew. So that
Mm.
concept, because a lot of Asians, they cannot eat too much, parang yung, very overly creamy, nakakasuya na taste.
Yeah.
So Japanese breads, Korean breads are a lot lighter and airier. It's not overly sweet, and it's crunchy on the outside and soft and pillowy inside. So that's the whole concept with this Japanese and Korean bakeries. Now, actually, I just love to eat.
Me too.
I,
Me too.
I mean, you can say all of these reasons, though, pero like in the morning, I just want to toast something and just eat it with a coffee.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very satisfying kasi to make to bring something in and bring something that was not here before. and because I was lucky enough to travel the early parts of my life, I get to experience all these food.
Mhm.
And then I decided to bring it in so other people can try it as well.
Yeah, and it's doing so well. I've read that it has at least 26 branches, and that it's it and in a matter of 4 years actually. So was it like, I want to know, like, it's safe to say that it's been well received by a lot of people. So what do you think sets you apart from other brick and mortar artisan bakeries?
Well, the thing with Boulangerie 22 is we don't use any chemicals and additives to our products. So it doesn't last as long as the other ones because we don't put the chemicals. We don't add anything to make the bread softer because, sometimes these chemicals, it's bad for your digestion. And, we consume so much of it that we don't know the long-term effects. So the bakery is, as good as how it's traditionally made, and it's the type of snack that I would give to my own kids.
Mm.
So I would, we want something that is very basic but tastes very good. And well, we're doing well promoting that.
So, what are your personal favorites? Like personal favorites from the menu, and like, or the ones that you'd like to make also, like in the kitchen, like helping bake in Boulangerie 22.
Well, the for the cake, my absolute favorite is the ube halo halo cake.
What?
It's it's an
Wow.
ube cake with leche flan, and we
Mm.
use Korean red beans. The problem with the local red beans is it's very stringy. So we had to get Korean red beans and put it in between, and there's ube buttercream.
Oh
So good.
God,
Like chiffon, leche flan, fantastic.
I love it. It's like an explosion of so many different flavors. Oh, I
Yeah.
can't wait to try it. I want to try it. I'm
The
so
ube
excited.
leche flan cake is really good.
There we
And then,
go.
of
There we
course, we have our custard breads. The Japanese custard bread is
go.
really, I mean, right now, I think you get it for free for every 500 peso purchase, the
Ooh.
Japanese custard bread. And my kids love, of course, the floss breads. And we also have the Korean garlic cream cheese bread.
Ooh, the one with the cheese in
Yeah.
the middle. Oh, yes.
There's like whip. We also have that as a class in Tika, the Korean
Ooh.
garlic cream cheese bread. And alam mo, if you bake that, the whole house will smell
Yes.
so good. Yeah,
Ah, I love it when a baked good does that. So it's just like, oh my gosh, it's heaven. But I like that you mentioned that it was also a class in Tika. Another class actually in Tika is your leche flan brioche donuts, and I think
that's
that's like one
correct.
of the popular classes that people are taking. So can you tell us, or for the monsters at least, can you describe to them if they don't know what it is, and they should know what it is, what a leche flan brioche donut is? It's exactly what it sounds, friends.
I think we're making a lot of people hungry.
I know, even me, even me.
Okay. So you have your usual yeast donut. That's the easy donut to make. A brioche donut, you say the yeast donut, after a day, sometimes it gets hard. The brioche donut is soft and pillowy for 3 days. It's the more difficult donut to make, but it's so good. It's worth making it. It takes time to make it because you need the air pockets to develop, but
Mm.
the recipe will tell you to, or even the video, I would tell my students to be patient because you really have to wait.
Yeah.
Now, the leche flan here is on the firm side. It's not like the very soft leche flan because it needs to retain the shape. So
Mhm.
imagine a brioche donut, light pillowy donut, and then you make a hole in the middle. You pipe in some leche flan curd, and you top it with a thick 2 inches round leche flan in the middle.
Mm.
And you sprinkle it with powdered sugar because you need more calories.
Oh my gosh. And then with coffee, oh, that sounds so
Mm.
perfect. Oh my gosh. What a sin to talk about this at 11 in the evening. But anyway, so okay, so thank you for sharing what a leche flan brioche donut is, and for all the monsters who are interested in making it, you just go to Tika and check out the class, and it's also hosted by Chef Andrea right here. So also aside from the pastries as well, you're also making breads, and what's the most fulfilling thing you think about baking bread?
Baking bread, honestly, it's the smell. You know the smell of pandesal early in the morning?
Yes.
You wake up to that smell.
Mm-hmm.
The ube cheese pandesal did so well 2 years ago. It became like a big thing, and everyone is ordering it because it was something different. It was something out of the box.
Yeah.
So the thing with food right now is you want to eat something that is interesting, that is new, that you've never tried before. So it's either
Mhm.
you go with something familiar or heartwarming, or you go something that is out of the box, that would make you go wow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Ube cheese pandesal. And now we also have, aside from ube cheese pandesal, which was like taking the country by storm 2 years ago, and maybe even until now, one of the other things that people learned to bake or was so viral was sourdough bread. So for bakers naman who are tuned in, what are your tips for making sourdough starter or keeping it alive aside from feeding it?
Well,
Because there's some elements, I'm sure. But what are your tips?
we do have a sourdough class by Chef Ermo,
Hmm.
and he likes to make everything from scratch. So he likes to use, let's say, fruit peelings and stuff like that for the starter. So it's
Oh.
all natural. And
Hmm.
well, the thing with sourdough starters is you just have to patiently feed it. It's like you have a Tamagotchi in a bottle that is in what do you call this, in Boulangerie 22. Our starter came from Italy, which is
Hmm.
149 years old. So
Oh
we
my
had
God.
to get a starter from there, and someone actually feeds it twice a day.
Oh,
So all
twice?
of our breads, we add a bit of the sourdough to it just to make it last longer naturally.
Mm-mm.
So what's so great about sourdough is, it's very good for your gut. It's
Hmm.
it cleans your it helps clean your intestinal tract. We had one baker who was doing R&D for it, and he was eating sourdough bread for 2 weeks, and he lost weight. He had like a
Oh
hot
my.
belly from drinking too much beer, but lumiit yung tiyan niya just by consuming a lot of sourdough, just by consuming a lot of, that probiotic, because it's fermented. It helps talaga to make, things go faster with your digestive tract.
I love that you're justifying the love of people for bread, especially sourdough bread. They can say at this point that it's healthy and it helps your gut. So that's
Yeah.
perfect. So also with regard to a sourdough starter, as a baker myself, of course I have to ask this because I've tried and failed making starter actually. So like what can you still use actually, because you have to toss some part of the sourdough starter so that you keep feeding it, but can you still use a discarded starter? Like can you put it in another jar and then feed that one so you have more starter for you?
And I wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend to start from the beginning. If it's dead, it's dead.
Okay, all right, that's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now, enough with the sourdough talk, but just know that it is healthy, monsters. What are the other fascinating food trends that you've heard people make during the pandemic? That maybe you've tried it also, but what were the
Well,
fascinating ones?
Bass burn cheesecake is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Fast
Mm-hmm.
burn cheesecake was really big during the lockdown or until now. Sushi
Mm-hmm.
bake is also there.
Yes. Yes.
Sushi bake, my God, everyone, I don't know who hasn't eaten sushi bake.
Yeah. It's I could eat like probably a tray of four for myself. 4 to 6, right? I can eat it for myself because it's just so good and it's Japanese food. But post pandemic, though, do you think all of these aspiring cooks and instant food businesses or the food businesses that propped up during the pandemic, do you think they will be able to continue to thrive even after the pandemic?
I think most of them will close. Most of them will probably go back to whatever their job was before.
Hmm.
But a lot of people who realize that this was their calling will end up investing more time and money to make it bigger. Because a lot of these online businesses, they were able to have their own following, their own customer base, and because they have regular orders, I'm sure they would probably, it's a smarter idea to expand further. But the other ones, it greatly depends on what they want to do because now they have options. They
Mm-mm.
can go back to what they were doing before, which some might do, and the rest would expand on this. Because you have to understand, not everyone likes to be in the kitchen. Some people
Mm.
are doing it because they have to.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of what your preference is.
Okay. And also another post pandemic question. In terms of restaurants, Saman, how can restaurants get back on their feet after 2 years of, ECQ, GCQ, MECQ? How do you think, or what's one way
Yeah.
you think that restaurants can recover from the start, actually, from of the pandemic?
One of the things a lot of restaurants are doing is they're streamlining their menu. So when the lockdown happened, a lot of them cut down the menu to lower their food cost. So
Mm.
they focused on fast moving items or best selling items, which is a smart way to go. And then they went on a skeletal, staff only, which is very
Mhm.
difficult for the staffs also because they're used to more people. So,
Mhm.
a lot of us when we go out, hopefully you'd be more understanding with these staffs also because either they have less people helping them or doing their job, or they have their own problems also. So I think we all just need to be a little more kinder in a way. But what else can they do to lower the rent, request for a rental reduction? Because you just have to lower cost. And what
Mhm.
people are saying right now is you just have to survive this. You don't have to do much. You can reinvent yourself. You can introduce more exciting menu items. But at the end of the day, you just have to survive. And hopefully after this is over, you are still there. You can slowly go get back up and slowly expand your menu, slowly add more staffs. You just have to, put your head up, your chin up, and survive this period.
Right. And so in the 2020s, or like moving forward after this year and the years to come, do you think that Filipino food and Filipino cooks will continue to make their mark in the world of food, like the international food scene?
I think Filipino food is it's not as pretty kasi compared to other cuisines. It's not presented as nicely,
Mm-hmm.
But I think because there are a lot of Filipino chefs in other countries trying to upgrade the Filipino dish. It's starting, but we're still a long way from other cuisines.
So hopefully the aspiring chefs will try and figure out a way to beautify also our dishes.
Yes, yes. I think it's a matter of time only because there is a big interest in Filipino food abroad,
Yeah.
especially if you go to certain places like LA or San Francisco. There are a lot of Filipino restaurants
Mhm.
and they serve Filipino food prettier than how we would do it here.
Mm-mm,
Kasi
mm-mm.
to us, it's lutong bahay.
True, true.
'Di ba? It's you don't need to make it as pretty because you're eating it at home, but there are ways to make it pretty. Kasi they would plate it pa, 'di ba? But us, we just put
Mhm.
it in one big bowl. Oh, let's eat. So
Yeah.
it will, it will take time, but it's getting there.
All right. And for this year at least, what do you think are the trends for food and beverage, at least this year and possibly in the foreseeable future as well?
Food trends. Well, it greatly depends until when this lockdown will be over.
That's true.
But everyone's still scared, but the country is slowly opening up. A lot of the other countries, they don't have mask protocols anymore. I think when things go back to normal, it will just be how it was before we close. Everyone just needs to recover first with the restaurants and but I think generally for this year, everyone's gonna go towards ideas that are like a lot of, let's say, street foods, things that we miss, that we want
Mhm.
to eat, or things that we can eat when we travel. So the things we cannot get will be the dishes that will be highlighted this year.
All right. So that's something a lot of food business owners should keep in mind as well. From for some restaurateurs who are probably also tuned in. Chef Andrea, or sorry, Andrea. I love calling people chef because it's just like, oh, there's a
No, it's
title.
yeah.
So you're a culinary instructor and a business owner. You're overseeing at least 26 branches of Boulangerie 22, and you have a Korean barbecue restaurant. How do you manage to find time for yourself, if I may ask?
Time, it's all about time management.
Mm,
You just have to prioritize and do what's important first. It's all about, you know, keeping a checklist, doing things as needed. It's very basic. It's there's no there's no real secret to it. It's a matter of getting the right people and making sure the task is done. It's just the usual, checklist,
mm,
following up, coordinating. You just have to know, you just have to exercise patience, which I do not have sometimes. But it's harder to get things done right now.
mm.
Sometimes a place is not open. Sometimes it's very difficult. It's more difficult, and a lot of people are going through something. So it's always important to be patient and be kind.
All right. Be patient and be kind and
Yeah,
prioritize. Use
yeah.
checklists. So we are actually nearing at the end of our show. Heard on Thursdays. We are live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch. Any tips for aspiring chefs and bakers out there who want to pursue either a profession or start a business of their own in food and beverage?
Okay. If you For bakers, it's very difficult because for bakers, baking is an exact science.
Mm-hmm.
For baking, I suggest you learn it from someone who knows more than you. You have to learn either, if not tika, if because if you do self-study, it is more costly. You will make a lot of mistakes. There are certain tips, like how do you know if your baking soda is still working or your yeast is still working? If you do not know these things, it will end up costing you more money.
Mm-hmm.
And with, what do you call this, with cuisine, well, that one, I suggest you learn a lot. Well, from chefs also, which will make your life a lot easier. But learn to expand and try other cuisines also. Learn other countries' dishes and expand you know, your taste profile. That way, you can learn how to make your own dishes by mixing a lot of ingredients. One of the things I'm very fortunate with is because, my mom cooks, my grandmother cooks, and I get to be exposed to a lot of these ingredients. And when I travel, I love going to the grocery. I love, getting all these ingredients, these herbs. You have to really experiment and put yourself out there. The thing with food is it's constantly evolving, and there's
Mhm.
everything is a fusion of something. There's no dish that is just Filipino only. For you to upgrade something, you have to experience other flavors. That way
Mhm.
you can elevate it further.
All right. I love that message. Okay,
Yeah.
expand, be more open minded. That's awesome.
Yes.
So, for all the monsters as well, Andrea, kindly invite them to Boulangerie 22, to Yori Korean barbecue restaurant, and even to Tika. So, at least, so if they can expand, so they can keep an open mind, diba? Plugging it
Yeah.
in.
So I'd like to invite everyone to try Laundry 22. If you check our Facebook page, we have regular promotions on breads and cakes. With Yori Korean Barbecue, we're located in Molito in Alabang. We pride ourselves in providing you authentic Korean barbecue. And of
Mm,
course, Tika, the Epicurean Academy of Culinary Arts. I'm very lucky that I'm surrounded by a lot of talented instructors who can help you start your culinary journey. Either if you just want to cook better at home, learn something new, or if you want to start a small business at home, you can start with something easy. We have courses for, you know, beginners and intermediate bakers, and for cuisine as well.
there we go. Oh my gosh,
Yay!
monsters. This was heard on Thursdays with me, Nikki, and my guest for tonight, Chef Andrea Amado. She is just full of knowledge in terms of Korean cuisine, in terms of baking. So it was such a pleasure to actually share my interests with her, really, for this evening. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for all of the monsters who have tuned in or who have watched online as well on Facebook, Twitch, and on YouTube. So, with that, I say good night and keep it locked only here on The Monster. Bye, guys.
Bye.